The M1A2 SEP V4 is dead. Long live the M1E3. Abrams X fans around the world are rejoicing about the selection of their new tank. I don't have an Abrams X to stand in front of, so here's a TTB. Now, this serves a couple of purposes. Firstly, the Army didn't say it's getting Abrams X. Secondly, if you really want to take a complete reconfiguration of the M1, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I kind of like the idea of having 44 stowed rounds ready to go. But I'll get to that. So, if you don't know what this is all about, is on the 6th of September, the Army issued a press release. It was entitled, Army Announces Plans for M1E3 Abrams Tank Modernization. So what I thought I would do was I would go through the press release and tell you what it says and what it doesn't say, in case you haven't read the release yourself. Now, before coming on camera, I wrote an email to Warren and said, look, I got a couple of questions. Some of them they answered happily enough. Some of them they were a little bit more cryptic about because they weren't allowed to say. Okay. The Army will close out the M1A2 System Enhancement Package version 4 SEP V4 effort and develop M1E3 Abrams, which will focus on making the capability improvements needed to fight and win against future threats on the battlefield of 2040 and beyond. Well, here's the thing. It's 2023 now. That means that the SEP V3 is basically going to be the last version of the Abrams until this M1E3 comes out. So are we going to be stuck with this for the next, well, I could say stuck with, it's still a good tank, for the next 18 years? Well, on the backside, initial operational capability is anticipated for the early 2030s. So we got about 10 years that the SEP V3 is the latest and greatest. Now, so what's going to happen though is they are actually going to backfill some of the V4 modernizations to the V3. So it's not going to be the V3 as it currently is that is it. So not everything from the V4 upgrade is going to be cascaded down to V3, because then you got a V4 and you kind of done it anyway. But some things are going to go in. You're going to see a new meteorological sensor. There's going to be a couple other bits and bobs. And also the A2s are also getting some of the upgrades. The AMP ammunition integration is going into the A2s. So not everything is from the V4 is going in, but it's still, there will be improvement to come in the V3. This is some of the interesting bits now. The Abrams tank can no longer grow its capabilities without adding weight, and we need to reduce its logistical footprint, said Major General Glenn Dean, PEO for Ground Combat Systems. There's two parts to that one sentence that have a lot of digging into. Now, the bit that the people are focusing in on is the Abrams tank can no longer grow its capabilities without adding weight. And you recall in my previous Designing the Tank in the Future videos that the Abrams started at 55 ton. There's one around the corner here. A 55 ton M1. Now, the V3 is 72.5 ton. If you add the trophy APS, that's an additional 2.5 ton on its own. Then you put the reactive armor tiles on the side. And, oh, let's put a mine plow on the front. Now your M1 is breaking 83 ton. So you got to reduce the weight a little bit. And a way of reducing the weight is to put a smaller turret on it. Hence the Abrams X design, PTB design, and so on. But what it doesn't say in here, and what they're not saying, is just how much weight are they trying to shed. Because if you're trying to shed 5 to 10 ton, that's one thing. If you're trying to shed 20 to 30 ton, then that's something else entirely. There are easy ways to shed 5 to 10 ton off of an M1 as it is. It just required a little bit more money, perhaps, than people were willing to spend until now. Think about it. The M1A2 is in effect an upgrade of 1990s era technology. So you go back to the original M1, there's an IP over there. This is basically an analog tank. When you got to the M1A1 AIMS, the Abrams Integrated Management System, what that was you had digital coders attached to the analog systems that allowed the computer to talk to the system. And as near as I can tell, this isn't far off the baseline of the M1A2. Then you did all the appending of things. So again, I put this in the last video. the upgrades that we have paid for our tanks have not been integrated upgrades from basically the ground up. This is, oh, we need a Crows, just bolt it on. If it doesn't integrate into the system, we'll just bolt on an integration module, such as a second control handle. And a lot of these features are happening. The APS, I'll guarantee you, I haven't looked inside it, but I'll put 99% chance that the APS is, you stick the APS on the outside, you stick the computer on the inside with a new panel, and there is an entirely new APS panel that you have added the weight, the cabling, the systems, and so on. So you can probably shave a few tons without touching the form factor of the M1A2 one bit. Rip out the guts, rip out all the electrics, all the electronics, and replace it from something that is designed and programmed from the ground up to be completely integrated. There's a start. Second thing you can do, M256 smoothbore cannon. Well, there is the XM360, which as far as I know does work. Well, you install that, you've shaved a ton off already. What else can you do? Well, about 15 years ago, I ran into the PEO Abrams, or PM Abrams, forgive me, of the time, and I asked him, out of curiosity, why are we still running hydraulics in our turrets when the Germans have moved from hydraulics to electric? And the answer he gave was that the electrics did not give the desired performance. You got more precision, better response out of the hydraulics than you did out of the electric. Well, that was 15 years ago. What would the electrics of today do? If they're good enough, rip out the hydraulics, put in electrics, hey, you just saved more weight. Those big copper wires are thick and heavy. What if you put fiber optics? Well, that'll save you a little bit of weight. Anybody want to care to guess how many tons of wiring are inside an M1? So getting it from the current 73 down to, oh, let's say 65 probably isn't all that hard. Estimating here. Now, if you want to take off more weight, yes, you're going to have to look at a more radical redesign. You're going to have to go to a zero-man turret like TTB or Abrams X. Or maybe you'll go to a two-man turret like Leclerc, like K2, like Type 10. There's plenty of experience out there to show if it works or not. Or maybe they'll keep the four-man turret. Who knows? They're not saying. But I'm going to come back to that, though, because there is an indicator, a hint of the future if you read a little bit further down. The other half of that first statement was reduce its logistical footprint. Now, that comes in two formats. It can come in terms of things like fuel consumption and spare parts and new tracks, and it's not just about the oil and the fuel, the POL. Or it could be in the more infrastructure side, the amount of effort it takes to recover one of these things. I mean, if it's 80-odd ton, you need a pretty beefy ARV or two of them in some circumstances. Or you'd need bigger bridges. The AVLB, the JAB they call it now. Can that take an M1A2 SEP V3 with a plow on the front? Probably not. I don't know. I haven't seen the official manual. Probably wouldn't be allowed to say even if I had. All right. So for the fuel aspect of it, you're looking at a couple of options. One is pull out the turbine. I mean, they've done wonders for it. It's far more fuel efficient than it was in the days that it got the reputation. But they could pull out the turbine, maybe replace it with a modern turbine. If you like turbines, believe me, I'm sure there's some pretty damn good turbines now. The AGT 1500 is not a modern engine. Or the Army has spent a lot of money paying Cummins to develop the Advanced Combat Engine. Now, this is an opposed piston modular engine, and it can be configured for 750 horsepower. I believe it's just a 6-cylinder version, to the 12-cylinder or piston version, which is 1,500 horsepower, the same as a turbine, the same as a modern MTU. It would make some sense that the Army is going to look very hard at this engine that they're paying a lot of money for the future engine, and put that into the tank. Maybe even with a hybrid powertrain. Again, fuel efficiency. Maybe other advantages in silent moving. Oh, okay, it's not going to be as quiet as the turbine engine is. Sad, but things like that happen. Another part of it is the spare parts. And this is something that people don't think about, is the amount of spare parts that, that come with a tank and the amount of time taken to troubleshoot it. And there are probably ways developed now that are a little bit more efficient in terms of repairing all the modules or the components than we're doing right now. If you were to rip the guts out of the tank and start from scratch, you can probably come up with a maintenance and logistics system for maintenance which is much more refined and efficient than it is today. People don't think about that. I guarantee you the engineers who are designing these things are. So that's the logistical side of things. The war in Ukraine has highlighted a critical need for integrated protection from soldiers built from within instead of adding on. So the immediate takeaway for some people is going to be, aha, the army are looking at this thing, they are getting these revelations of modern combat. No. The US is not getting many revelations out of this. What they are getting is a little bit more emphasis that, yeah, these things that we've identified already are important. Because here's another paragraph from the press release. Years of testing, analysis, soldier feedback, and maturing technology culminated in this decision. Years of testing. This has apparently been in the works for the better part of 3 years. Now, in 2020, the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation put out his annual report, and in it, when it gets to the M1E3 section, it basically says, guys, this is getting a little bit out of hand. The tank is a tad heavy. So this was 3.5 years ago. The Army understands that they're pretty much at the limit. And again, if you want to increase the capability of this tank over the next 30 years, however long it's going to be in service, you need room to expand. The only way to get room to expand is to cut back to a lower baseline. So this decision, if it does turn out to be that or Abrams X-ish, has nothing to do with the fact that a year ago, GDLS marketing department rolled out the Abrams X. They may choose Abrams X, I don't know, they're not saying. Why is it being done now? Well, that's what I said about the operations in Ukraine are suddenly paying attention to things that had already been identified but not yet been addressed. This E3 modification instead of the V4 upgrade is probably pricey, more pricey than a V4. Now, you get what you pay for, usually, but in order to justify, yeah, we need to spend a lot more money on this M1 upgrade instead of this lots of money for the M1 upgrade, something like the Ukraine conflict is a little bit of a kick in the pants and is probably going to attract somebody's attention and say, okay, yeah, we need to do it. All right. The M1A3. Okay, here we go. The new approach balances costs with the Army's needs and invests in the nation's defense industrial base. Now, that's another thing that I asked. Invest in the nation's defense industrial base, because that implies somebody's going to be chucking some money at the plants as opposed to just new technology. And the chances are that it's going to be requiring a little bit of new tooling, that the shape of the turret is probably going to change. Now, here's an example as to why. I mentioned that the Trophy APS adds 2.5 tons to the M1 tank. And if you think about it, it's the radar, the launchers, the control system. How is that 2.5 tons? And the answer is it's not. It's about 1.25 tons, a little bit more. But when you mount these things onto the vehicle, you've unbalanced the turret. So now you have to put, I've been told it's up to 1.5 tons of dead weight. I don't know if it's accurate or not. I've not seen the specs, but I'm told it's 1.5 tons of dead weight just to balance the turret to make the turret turn correctly. If you're going to install an APS from the start, and you're going to have the turret designed correctly, that this isn't an appendage sticking onto the side somewhere wherever you could fit it, and it works, and it doesn't interfere with the radio antenna, because, oh yeah, you've got radar going out, you want to make sure your commo still works, not just your radio, but also your SATCOMs and everything else that you got in the system, you probably are going to have to redesign the turret. And if you were going to go to the effort of redesigning the turret, are you going to do a British thing like Challenger 3 and just say, yeah, okay, we'll just redesign it enough? Or are you going to redesign the turret? The Army's not saying, the PR statement isn't saying, and the response I got by email was very cagey on this matter. So draw your own conclusions how much they are going to read it. All I'm saying from this is they are insane. This is not really just a video about they are insane. This is a video I'm trying to get you to think about the factors that are going behind this decision. It's more important really than what the decision is, because even if they've made a decision, they're not telling us, what's the point? But if I'm at least getting you to understand what they're thinking, then I think this meets the point of this video. The Army will continue to produce M1A2 SEP V3 at a reduced rate until production transitions to the M1E3. Now, why is it an E3? Why is it not just another version of the SEP V4? It's because it is, well, actually, they explain it in the next paragraph. The M1E3 Abrams nomenclature is a return to the Army's standard use of its type classification and nomenclature system for a combat vehicle fleet. The E designation represents an engineering change to an existing platform that is more significant than a minor modification and serves to designate the prototype and development configuration until the vehicle is formally type classified and receives an A designation. So it's not an M1A2E1. They're not taking the M1A2 as the base. It's the M1E3. They're going back to, this is a basic Abrams concept. Let's do the next engineering variant. The last one of these I can recall was the M1E1, which was the 120mm version. Those of you who watch my channel, you'll come across E designations all the time. It's not a new thing. For people that don't watch my channel very much, this may be a new thing. There's one last little item in here, was to do with the latest modular open systems architecture standards, allowing for technology upgrades quicker and requiring fewer resources. I mentioned this again in the Designing of the Tank of the Future video, is that the way the Army's vehicles are designed, the backbone, the central nervous system of these things is a new version. It's compatible across vehicles. It's going to be in the XM30, the minimally manned combat vehicle, the formerly optionally manned combat vehicle. It's got a full name. I tweeted it out a while ago. And that's basically another advantage to simply ripping the guts out of the Abrams and starting over. So there you go. Hopefully that gave you a little food for thought. Again, what is it going to look like? I don't know. Is it going to be Abrams X? I'll still put $100. Says I'm not going to put that remote operated cannon on the top because that adds weight that they're trying to get rid of. And of course, the Army is looking at more air defense through other assets. Is it going to be a TTB? I mean, honestly, if you're going to go for an unmanned turret, there's an argument for TTB over Abrams X because I mean, look at the profile. But I don't know. Hope you found the talk interesting and informative. I'll talk to you on the next one.